Tigrai Central Command Getachew Reda says Tigray Defense Forces have completely crushed joint military campaign by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces in Dedebit front. In his exclusive interview with Tigray television on Friday, Getachew Reda said the joint military offensive was meant to take up Mekelle on the 11th of September, which he said was very ambitious. Abiel Tsagabo reports.
In an interview with Tigray television, member of Tigray Central Command Getachew Reda said Tigray Defense Forces have scored major victory in the Dedebit front against Ethiopian forces and allies from Eritrea and Amhara.
Generals, army generals, who are supposed to know the basics of military science would deploy close to 90,000 people within a 90 square kilometer area. So yesterday morning, we had completely crashed the Dedebit front. Was tens of thousands killed and wounded, and thousands more captured. The rest, tens of thousands, are retreating in this area.
Getachew added the joint military campaign was meant to take up Mekelle on the 11th of September and said the plan was not only ambitious but also ridiculous.
But their hope and expectation was for the Dedebit front to crumble so that forces from Tzelemt, from Dedebit and from Adiabo could join and march all the way to Shire, and then, of course, the Rama and the Alambasa part of the engagement would then kick off, and then the Eritreans and the Ethiopian forces would move deep into Tigray and take over Mekelle on the 11th of September. It's not just ambitious; it's absolutely ridiculous for them to assume that their movement would be a cakewalk. Of course, it wasn't a cakewalk.
Getachew stressed that Tigray has shown Ethiopian and Eritrean forces that military option is not an option, and was heard to say Tigray has one of the strongest militaries in the region.
I mean, it's harebrained in every sense of the term. For people who at least have a rudimentary knowledge of military, to assume that they can barge their way into Tigray when Tigray, unfortunately for us, has one of the strongest militaries in the region now. That's plain stupid. Any military within their right mind would assume that their plans have fallen through if they see that thousands of their people are captured or taken prisoners of war in a single battle. These people wouldn't care a hoot how many people lose their lives. And obviously, they don't care about people's lives. In the Dedebit alone, we're talking about 90,000 souls stampeding. Is that fighting? Is that an offensive? Stampeding to fight, stampeding to live, but being victims of gunfire from both sides. Yeah, whatever their calculations are, we have shown them that military solution is not an option. So I cannot really speak for Abiy or the Mecca, but we insist that talking is the only game in town. Shooting is not working.
Getachew also says Ethiopian authorities are more interested in negotiations than in peace, saying the recent drone attacks by Ethiopian government shows that the Ethiopian government lacks the interest to solve the crisis peacefully. He said the attacks would kill civilians and destroy public infrastructure, but cannot change the facts on the ground.
The political implication for anyone who cares to understand is that the Ethiopian government is not interested in peace. To the extent that it is interested in the language of negotiations, it is because it's fashionable to talk about peaceful resolution to the conflict, because the international community wants to listen to that. And you know, Abiy and company, in their smart alecky way, would have you believe that they are ready for an AU-led process, that they are all for Mr. So-and-so. They are ready to talk without preconditions, and yet humanitarian access for them is a precondition. The restoration of services is a precondition. Because they assume that we will say no to an AU-led process. Because they assume that we'll give them... I mean, they were coming up with a very ridiculous argument that the fact that we haven't publicly declared the name of the people who would represent Tigray simply shows that we're not ready for peace. Now that we have declared the lead members of the team, they are left with nothing to say. So they have to go on creating all kinds of apocryphal stories. In fact, going ahead with their disastrous adventures, trying to change the facts on the ground. I don't think they are going to change the facts on the ground. We believe there is no chance they can change the facts on the ground. Otherwise, drone attacks will continue, offensives will continue. What difference would it make? They will kill more children, they will kill more women, they will kill more innocent civilians, they will destroy what is left of Tigray infrastructure. Yeah, we'll have to rebuild Tigray from the ground up once the dust settles, and it will.
U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Eritrea needs to withdraw its forces to its borders. In a press briefing on Thursday, the spokesperson stated that Eritrea and other countries need to stop adding fuel to the conflict in Tigray. Price also highlighted that there is no military solution to the war in Tigray and called on both parties in the conflict to come to the table and find peaceful solutions. Salome Tigrai reports.
In a press briefing on Thursday, spokesperson for the U.S. State Department, Ned Price, called for the immediate withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Tigray territories. The spokesperson also stated that Eritrea should refrain from exacerbating the conflict on the region.
We also call on Eritrea to withdraw to its borders and for Eritrea and others to cease fueling this conflict. These actions are increasing tensions throughout the region. They are worsening the humanitarian situation at a time of pronounced drought and food insecurity.
Ned Price emphasized that the United States condemns the resumption of the war on Tigray and asked for both parties to come to the table and find a peaceful end to the conflict.
We are increasingly concerned by the growing military activity in northern Ethiopia. We strongly condemn the resumption of hostilities. There's no military solution to this conflict. These actions are inconsistent with the government of Ethiopia and Tigrayan regional authorities' stated willingness to talks. And we call on both the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray regional authorities to halt immediately their military offensives and to pursue a negotiated settlement through peace talks under the auspices of the African Union. We commend and support the AU's diplomatic efforts to start talks as soon as possible. We welcome the ongoing commitment in AU-led peace talks by both parties, the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray regional authorities. And in coordination with international partners, we have committed our readiness to actively support this AU-led peace process.
The spokesperson said that the United States Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, Ambassador Mike Hammer, remained in Ethiopia as part of his 2-week visit since September 4, 2020, and that he was engaging in talks with both parties to help end the war peacefully.
Well, Special Envoy Hammer is still in the region. He's wrapping up 2 weeks in the region. He's remained actively engaged with the government of Ethiopia, with Tigray regional authorities, with the African Union, and with international partners to seek to advance an important effort to bring about peace.
It is to be recalled that the government of Tigray announced its readiness for African Union-led peace process earlier this week, while Abiy Ahmed's government continues to bombard residential areas and civilian installations on consecutive drone attacks, including the one conducted earlier this morning.
A drone attack in a residential area in Meghaleh on Wednesday killed 10 civilians and wounded several others. Most of the fatalities occurred in second round of drone attack that struck people who have tried to help the victims of the first round of the attack. Our reporter Haile Gebru spoke to the siblings of one of the victims who said their brother Woldai Hailu was ambulance driver who happened on the scene to help the victims. Let's take a look.
Woldai Hailu, one of the victims, was working for Magala Industrial Park as an ambulance driver since his establishment. Now he has passed away due to the Wednesday's drone attack in Magala while he trying to rescue other victims of the bombardment during the first round attack. Siblings to the victims say their brother was the first to respond while the victims fainted out following the first round attack.
I am an older brother of Woldai Hailu. Firstly, Woldai was a first responder when the drone attacks on a residential area around. Unfortunately, he became a victim himself, while the drone came back and dropped it again. From the onset of his career, he has been working as a life rescue and ambulance issues. He couldn't take his ambulance at the time due
the Ethiopian regime, which kills children and mothers on a daily basis.
Of others. He was helping because the accident took place around here. He used to lead the family. He has children who need bread daily. But I don't know about the children. It's so difficult to describe.
Fitsum Hailu, brother of the victim, added that the international community must let Abiy Ahmed stop bombing children and other civilians and urge to go into the political dialogue.
It's been a long time since the atrocities start to take place. I can say this is purely genocide. This is happening in a broad daylight. The world should take a concrete measure over the perpetrators and soon. We are fed up with the repeated expression of concern. Now it's time to decide and impose sanctions against Ethiopian authorities and cronies. The international community must urge the Ethiopian regime to stop its reckless bombings as children and adults are being killed, not military installations. The regime never hit a target yet, but public properties and religious institutions.
Emergency Case Team Coordinator for Bureau of Health, Dr. Abenezer Zadingel, on his part says the Ethiopian government is bombing civilians and civilian properties as the world continues to watch idly by.
Civilians are the one who have been carrying this burden of the casualty. And to comment on the recent bombings, on the last 3 days, there was intensive bombings, as we all know, and 12 people have already died and 24 are already injured. And unfortunately, out of the 12, some of them are actually died after they have been already admitted to hospital, but they cannot survive because there is no enough medication for them to treat them, as well as there is no enough, in addition to this, there is no enough oxygen, because the oxygen plants are out of work, because we cannot maintain them, because we need equipment for their maintenance. We need fuel to transport medicines as well as oxygen to the health facilities, and the health workers themselves are, as we all know, they are starving. So this all has culminated into the deterioration of health system, which we cannot take care of the patients who need the greater attention. What makes it peculiar also in the recent attacks is it is the first responders whom get attacked.
because on the September 4th this attack, it is the first responders, which means medics and ambulance drivers and the fire engines were the first to arrive at the scene, and they were attacked again by the same airstrike, which have caused a lot of casualties among the first responders, among themselves.
And that's all we have for today. Thanks for watching.